What's up YouTube and welcome to the Anabolic Outpost. In today's recipe tutorial, I have quite the interesting one, bringing you a recipe tutorial for anabolic cottage cheese bagels. These bagels are a great alternative. For instance, if you want bread on the side with your meal, you could substitute these bagels as they're higher in protein and arguably tastier, with the addition of the cottage cheese contributing to both of these aspects. These things are so delicious that you shouldn't even see these as a health food and make these without even thinking in place of your bread. These things are also great for sandwiches and super versatile in general. Another great thing about these bagels is you can make them in bulk, and if you freeze them they could last up to several months with the same quality. And the best part of all is that they're super easy to make with not many ingredients, so let me just quickly show you what you will need to make this. The first ingredient, obviously the most important ingredient, is going to be the fat-free cottage cheese. The next ingredient is going to be oat flour, and if you just have oats, don't worry, you could just blend the oats up and you have oat flour right there. Moving on, we have 1 whole egg, baking powder, salt, and then optionally you could top it with some sort of seed. I'm going to be using sesame seeds, but chia seeds and flax seeds I've used and have had success with both of those as well. And before we start making this recipe, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Getting into the mixing of this recipe now, we're going to start by mixing in the dry ingredients, and the first ingredient that I'm going to be adding is 100 grams of oat flour. Also keep in mind that if you're making this yourself, this recipe is going to yield 4 individual bagels. I'm now going to add 1 gram of salt. And the last dry ingredient to help make these fluffy like bread is going to be 6 grams of baking powder. You can now go ahead and hit these dry ingredients with a quick whisking before we move on to adding the wet ingredients. And I actually forgot to record myself adding in the cottage cheese, but I added in 230 grams. And there you can finally see where the bulk of this protein is at in this recipe. And the final ingredient, other than the toppings, is going to be the 1 whole egg, which I'm going to crack into there right now. You can now go ahead and mix this together, and you're actually supposed to slowly add the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients, but I like to cheat a little bit and just add the wet ingredients right on top of each other, and then just mix the wet ingredients slowly. As you can see, the powder is still on the edges, and I'm just mixing it in slowly into the wet ingredients. And this helps to achieve the same effect of slowly adding in the dry ingredients, as it's slowly getting incorporated into the wet ingredient mixture. You can call me cheating all you want, but they really turn out the exact same. And of course you just want to work this for a couple minutes until it is an even consistency throughout. Once that batter is mixed together, you could go ahead and take a cooking sheet and line it with parchment paper. And like I do whenever I'm working with batter with my hands, I always go ahead and spray my hands with oil and just rub it in on my palms real quick. I always include this tip in my videos, so you're probably sick of hearing this, but it's just such a great tip when working with batter, and it helps to just slide off instead of sticking all over your hands. Like I said earlier, this recipe is going to make 4 individual bagels, and if you're not good at eyeballing like I'm kind of doing right now, you could just take smaller scoops to start out. And once you have 4 even bagels of batter, you could just slowly add the rest of the remaining batter on top of those bagels. Tip for these as well, because of the ingredients, they're not going to flatten as much as normal bread would be in the oven, or kind of like cookies in your thinking of that aspect, so it does help if you want to flatten them before they go into the oven. Still flatten a little bit, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Getting in there with a rubber spatula to get the remaining of the batter and add it individually on top of each of the bagels before I send them into the oven. Lastly, to top these off, I'm just going to be adding a little sprinkle of sesame seeds on top of each bagel. Now slide these bagels into the oven, and I'm going to go ahead and set my oven timer for 20 minutes, but these could take all the way up to 25. My oven, I end up pulling them around the 23 to 24 minute mark, but obviously it just depends on the type of oven. Come out, you're going to want to let them cool for 10 to 15 minutes. Once they're done cooling, they should come out something like this. It will have a slight browning and crisping on the top layer, but it will still be ooey and gooey with the cottage cheese inside. There you have it. These are the anabolic cottage cheese bagels with the beautiful sesame seed sprinkle on top. Of course, you could get creative with what you sprinkle on top of these as well. People like a bunch of different things on their bagels, and I've done like an everything bagel seasoning, and that has worked great as well. I was saying in the intro, these are incredibly versatile, and I find these making myself quite often nowadays. With all the recipes on my channel though, it is now time for me to give you a macro breakdown for this recipe. For the purpose of this video, I will be giving you the macros of one of these bagels, but of course you could adjust it based on the purposes that you were using them. In each bagel, it has 13 grams of protein, 20 grams of carbs, 4 grams of fat for a total of 165 calories. So pretty high calories, and I wouldn't say it's any less calories than regular bread, but when you factor in the 13 grams of protein in there, you use that as justification for calling these anabolic. Kids decide to make a sandwich with these before even adding the meat or any of the other toppings that may be high in protein as well. You're already giving yourself 26 grams of protein in just the bread alone on your sandwich. And then these are super filling and they will sit in your stomach for hours. Fortunately, it is now time for me to wrap up this video. Support has been continually going up recently on the recipe tutorials, so I appreciate that very much. You need to like and comment on these videos to help push my videos out into the YouTube algorithm. It really means a lot to me. And if you'd like to take a step further and support the channel, I will have my Patreon link down in the description below, and you can click on that. There's a variety of different tiers for how much you're willing to spend and help support the channel. Thank you for watching though, and I will see you in the next one.